The county of Wiltshire has many vales, hills and downs. There's the Pewsey Vale, the Deverell Valley, the Vale of Dauncey, the Marlborough Downs and of course Salisbury Plain, to name but just a handful. However, there is one area which is perhaps not so familiar, the Fox Vale, so named because of the River Fox which meanders diagonally across it from southwest to northeast. Acre Down, the ancient hill fort which looms above the vale, is primarily chalk and has a traditional Wiltshire white horse cut into its side. What it looks down upon is a clay vale, an area of dairy farming. Immediately below Acre Down is the attractive village of Acrebury, a Saxon settlement which was a rotten borough, having once returned a Member of Parliament. It's a large village which, 100 years or so ago, would have been classed as a rural service centre, that is, a village with businesses designed to serve the other small communities that surround it. To take a trip to Cartampton in those days would have been like travelling to the ends of the earth, although it's only 10 miles away. But times have changed, and so has that large town. Cartampton is expanding and is the Vale's centre of command, being the base of Foxvale District Council. Barry Dixon had travelled those 10 miles to Acrebury to meet a man who had just celebrated his birthday. Not just any birthday, but his 90th. He pulled up outside Meadow Cottage and checked the address in his diary. This was it, the home of Colin Bourne. Locking the car door, the good-looking young Cartampton reporter from Lancashire gazed around him at Acrebury village, a place he'd only ever driven through previously. He could get used to living in a place like this, he thought. Meadow Cottage stood on the southern side of a large square of grass, which was clearly the village green. Acrebury Green Farm stood next to it. Colin Bourne greeted Barry at his gate. The garden was a picture. The daffodils were out, the roses were neatly pruned, a large yucca plant stood just to one side of the sitting-room window, and the crocuses were delightful.
You won't find no keener gardener than I.
I don't know how you do it, Mr. Tuck. Do you think that's the reason for you reaching the age you just celebrated? The old man was halfway up the garden path, heading towards his cottage.
I don't suppose it have done I any harm.
He pushed open the slightly weathered front door, which led straight into his sitting room, and Barry followed him in.
Take your jacket off and put over that chair.
Colin Bourne prodded the glowing embers of what remained of his fire with the poker, and Barry looked around the low-beamed room. It was cosy but not very well kept. Piles of newspapers sat in the deep sill of the front window, through which could be seen the dominant beauty of St Mary's Parish Church, on the northern side of the green. Behind Barry was an old undusted dresser, upon which was an antique wireless set. Having placed another log on the fire, the old man then sat back in his chair, but kept his flat cap firmly on his head.
So what exactly is it you wants from I?
Barry fumbled in his leather case for his notepad and pencil, and a cutting from the Gazette, which was a previous article he'd written. He handed it to Colin Bourne.
Down the Wiltshire Road,
the old man read out. This was the title. I do a monthly featuring Gazette about village life in the Fox Vale. Now it's Acrebury's turn, and Mrs. Hicks, the postmistress, told me I ought to speak to you, because she thought you can probably tell me about how village life has changed here in your lifetime. The old man looked up from the article and began to think.
Where do we want I to begin?
While Colin Bourne enlightened his guest with stories of his life, a young girl looking no more than 16 years of age wandered across the village green outside. Her unkempt appearance wasn't helped by her fair straggly hair which hung down over her face and reached down to the middle of her back. Her denim jacket and jeans were tatty, patched in places with brightly coloured material. She was heading towards the row of grey stone buildings on the eastern edge of the green, and in particular the post office and stores. Postmistress Carrie Hicks was just serving her cousin Ivy Crook with a small amount of provisions.
I want an iceberg lettuce as well, please. My Harry won't settle for nothing else. Over there with the cabbage and taters, said Carrie.
The young girl came in and closed the door behind her, and wandered to the rear of the shop. One hand was pressed firmly in the middle of her back, and she appeared to be in some kind of pain. Ivy nosily peered after her when crossing the shop to select her lettuce. The girl turned slowly around to face this short, dumpy woman in the plastic overall and carpet slippers. Ivy toyed with making conversation, but the girl wouldn't let her. She turned away again, then wandered around the other side of the grocery fixtures.
Can I help you at all, my dear?
Asked Carrie. The girl stared at her. felt her stomach, opened her mouth as if to speak, then appeared to change her mind, closing it again. She suddenly headed towards the shop door and went outside. Ivy returned to the counter and paid for her goods, and both she and Carrie stared out of the window, watching the girl disappearing towards the churchyard.
What do you make of her, Ivy? You don't reckon her pinched summat, do you? I shouldn't think so. Her one in here long enough for that. But I tell you summat, if she ain't close to her time, I should be very surprised.
Some of the stories with which Colin Bourne had enlightened Barry Dixon were nothing short of hilarious and invaluable. The young reporter had made copious notes on his pad.
I went to school here, course, and 'tis still open. That's it over there on the west end of the green, look, next to the vicarage.
Tell me about your school days, Mr. Tuck. Colin Bourne told him about the time when Gordon Gossett from Churchington Hamlet bet him a shilling he wouldn't sneak into the adjoining schoolhouse when Miss Butcher, the headmistress's back was turned. She lived in the house.
He bet I wouldn't go up into her bedroom and see what colour bloomers was hanging up in her wardrobe.
And did you?
Course I did. I wasn't going to let Gordon Gossett call I no chicken and keep his shilling, 'cause he was a tight devil, snow. And what think you, her never caught I neither. Hey, by the way, they was pink uns. Well, see, they wants to get I out of here.
Why is that?
Well, I got no sanitation here, no bathroom. Bill and Betty wants I to go into sheltered accommodation, but I be all right as I am.
His young guest got the distinct impression that the old man could be somewhat obstinate. But if it was his home and he was happy and capable, why should he move?
See, this cottage once belonged to Bill Barrett's parents, and my father worked for they, and he bought it from them in 1929 for 150 quid.
Colin Bourne hadn't followed in his father's footsteps. In fact, he'd worked for a wagon builder in Carthampton.
That's how the town got its name, see, 'cause 'twas the wagon and farm cart building capital of Wiltshire in they days.
Bill and Betty Barrett had been firm friends of the old man for many years, and were quite naturally concerned for his welfare at such a great age. Barry put on his coat and filed his notebook and pencil into his leather case, extremely pleased with all his material. He wished Colin Bourne a happy Easter and a belated happy birthday, which had been on April the 1st.
That might have been the day I was born, but I ain't nobody's fool,
the old man said as he led the young reporter towards his garden gate. That was for sure, thought Barry. He then waved to Colin Bourne, jumped into his car and headed back towards Carthampton. He would be back in the village tomorrow to meet the vicar. Dusk was beginning to fall on the village. The churchyard was peaceful, but behind the tool shed the young stranger lay propping herself against it. She grabbed hold of her stomach once again and then helped herself up from the ground.
Lord, here comes another one,
she gasped, then doubled with pain. She slowly made her way across the grass, holding on to headstones and box tombs as she headed towards the side gate next to Church Farm, David and Gwen Embling's place.
Shelter. A warm barn, that's what I need. There'll be one at the farm, bound to be. Oh.
As she crept into the yard of Church Farm, she noticed a light in a downstairs window of the farmhouse. There was her barn across the yard, and it was open. The inside was dark, somewhat spooky, but it was shelter and was laden with straw. She gathered up a makeshift bed and settled herself down, not knowing what would become of her. About an hour later, David Embling told his wife Gwen that he was going out to lock up.
Then I'll wash and change it, get off over to the Boar's Head. Bill Barrett's ordered me to a game of crib tonight, love.
He closed the door of the warm kitchen behind him and crossed the yard to the tractor shed. He turned the key in the large padlock. Suddenly, he stopped on hearing a noise coming from within the large barn at the back of the yard. It was a noise he'd heard many times, but not in a barn, on a farm. David Embling approached the barn with stealth, not knowing what he was really going to find. He opened the door but could see nothing in the darkness. However, the sound of a newborn baby was unmistakable.